Real talk for real teachers. Advice for teachers from rookies to veterans. No retreat, no surrender by Rafe Esquith. Chapter 12, Bitter Fingers. One Friday, as I was walking down the hallway, I passed a teacher heading for her classroom. "Happy Friday," I said, figuring the thought of a weekend would make most people smile after a long and tiring week. "I hate Fridays," she growled back. Before I could ask the obvious follow-up, she clarified her response. "I hate Fridays because it just means that Monday is that much sooner." Now that's a glass half empty attitude. This woman is a good and caring teacher, but she was tired and worn out. Teaching can do that to a person, and it is difficult not to become bitter after years in the classroom. Through how many hoops can a thinking adult jump? When new approaches to teaching are preached at staff development sessions, often completely contradicting what experts were preaching just a few years before, it's hard not to become jaded. Throw in some truly difficult students and an administrator who offers no support. Finish it off with grading the essays of illiteral 10th graders, and the recipe for bitterness is almost complete. For dessert, add a monthly magazine article citing teachers as the reason schools are failing. These ingredients can cause the most idealistic class leader to deteriorate into an angry, pessimistic, and sarcastic instructor. After teaching for 5 years or so, you reach a crossroads. You've made it, more or less. You have survived some frustrating days. Your class is normally under control and functioning. You have taught long enough that even with a switch in grade level or school, your previous experience has provided you with enough tools to establish order in the classroom. You have begun to find your voice, and you have made real connections with some of those kids. And now you have to make a decision. Are you going to basically keep doing what you're doing and phone it in for the next 2 decades? Or will you challenge yourself to keep growing? Many good people, phone it in. The job is tiring, and if you have started a family, you cannot be expected to come back to school at night for a function. Even if you want to continue to go the extra mile, there are dozens of small defeats that make good teachers slump down and wonder, what's the point? The road to nowhere. Denise entered the profession for all the right reasons. She had discovered a love for children while working at a series of child care centers when she was in college and graduated with a degree in early childhood education. She struggled during her first few years of teaching, but she battled through the tears and sweat to become a fine young instructor. By her 3rd year, she was taking an active role in school leadership, and she gained a reputation as a rising star among the parents and staff. Enter Valerie, a 9-year-old student with a mother who made school personnel miserable. This woman would burst into a classroom in the middle of the day and scream at her daughter's teacher about whatever was making her unhappy. Valerie was a capable student, but in her mother's eyes, she was Einstein, Mother Teresa, and the Virgin Mary rolled into one. If Valerie brought home a paper that was not covered with glowing comments, Mom would go to the principal or district office to register vicious complaints about the teacher. One day, she pounded on Denise's door when school was in session. She said she was picking up her daughter because she had a doctor's appointment and wanted company. When Denise told the woman that Valerie was missing too much school and it was hurting her education, the mother cursed the teacher in front of the class and took her child anyway. Denise was very upset and went to the principal demanding that something be done to prevent the mother from interrupting the class and removing her daughter for all sorts of ridiculous reasons. The principal explained that he had met with the mother several times, but in the end, the mother's weekly invasions needed to be tolerated. There was not much that could be done. Denise was furious. She felt that her administrator needed to stand up to the parent, even to the point of throwing her off the campus. When this didn't happen, Denise grew frustrated. She began treating Valerie rudely, growing short with her when she asked for help, and often ignoring her raised hand. Feeling unappreciated and let down by the principal, Denise quit all her leadership roles at the school. She refused to help an administration she believed did not support her. This is a very common tale. Denise made a deliberate turn at the fork in the road and went nowhere. She still teaches today and is adequate. Her classroom is in order, and most of her students spend a year in a sterile environment, numbly doing their work, and for the most part, passing their tests. The class is a far cry from the happy and hopeful environment Denise had begun to create in her early years. It is said that a Shakespearean tragedy is tragic not merely because it is a sad story, but because it's a story that could have been joyful and instead had its potential bliss cut short. We weep for Hamlet not simply because of his death, but for a king he might have been. Teachers who allow the frustrations of the profession to turn their potential into bitter fingers are indeed tragic figures. They lose their potential excellence. And of course, their students are the biggest losers of all. Two out of three ain't bad. It's astonishing to reflect on all the factors that embitter teachers. Anger at the administration is common. Working with students who come from families who show absolutely zero interest in their education is another factor. High-stakes testing, schools in disrepair, mean colleagues, and an unappreciative society all pile on a teacher's psyche to produce a bunker mentality. The dismissal bell on Friday signals the end of another week of torturous and pointless work. But nothing can quench an educator's fire faster than a student who foolishly chooses not to pass through the doors that his teacher has worked so hard to open. When you've put in extra time only to fail, it makes it that much harder to go the extra mile the next time a situation arises where you might do some good. King Lear's "How sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child has in one way or another resounded to many a teacher trying to help a child in need. I have often been asked why I do not burn out. Had I continued, as I did in my youth, to try to fix every problem and help every child in need, I would have certainly flamed out years ago. Some see teaching as a thankless job, but it might be better for the psyche to think of it as a service job. The reward for teaching is teaching itself. Of course it is gratifying to receive heartfelt letters and thanks from a grateful student and his family, but to expect and hope for such recognition is a slippery slope that can erode the joy of teaching. All students must be given an opportunity to learn and have fun. Some will and some won't, but most teachers love to teach. The bitterness comes when our efforts are pointless. If you are going to do something extra, such as stay after school to tutor a child in trouble, or spend a Saturday afternoon with the kids at an art museum, know that you are most likely to have one of three outcomes. First, the student might grow from your extra effort and show appreciation, thus stealing your resolve to do more. Cards and letters from former students now in college or happily married are some of the most rewarding, wonderful rewards a teacher can receive. There is not a teacher I know who does not read such letters after they have had a bad day. Such appreciation rejuvenates our tired souls and reminds us why we stick with a job whose rewards are far and few between. A Saturday afternoon spent at a wedding of a beautiful young woman who was once a little girl in your class is an incredible experience. Having that woman acknowledge that your efforts were an important part of her growth and development is a feeling better than standing in Stockholm and holding a Nobel Prize in education. Second, students might grow from your extra efforts, show no appreciation, and have better lives without even realizing they owe some of their good times and success to you. This happens a lot and can make one sad. Don't let it. If you do extra work with the mindset that most kids, hey, most people, often do not appreciate their blessings, you can keep your spirits high by feeling good about a job well done. I once had a student with Tourette's syndrome, raised by a single parent who did not have the knowledge or connections to get his child help. My wife drove the parent and child to see a series of doctors, including a top pediatric neurologist, who told them there was medication that might be able to help if the boy was able to take it safely. 3 weeks and several $1,000s later, we had radically changed this child's life for the better. Most of his tics were under control, and he developed friendships and began to do well in school. In 1 year, he went from being viewed as a freak by ignorant classmates to being a valued member of their community. We never received a thank you from this child or his parent. The boy went on to college and today is married and successful. Do I wish he would make a contribution to our class foundation to help others the way he once was helped? Of course I do. Do I feel bad because I failed to instill in this young man a generosity of spirit? Absolutely. And yet, I never get to the point of bitterness because the goal was to help a young man, and I did. Helping and a job well done are the rewards. Number 3 is the downer. Complete failure. This is just an awful feeling, and it happens a lot. You wouldn't be human if you didn't just throw up your hands and cry out, "Oh, what's the use?" After 3 decades, I have personally gone the extra mile for many kids when there was no point in doing so. The work was not only unappreciated, but completely ineffective. I once had a student in need who I believed could benefit from my extra assistance. I didn't just go the extra mile, I practically ran the marathon for him. In the end, I did not help this young man at all. I worked with him over summers. Believing in this young man's potential to beat the odds, I helped him get a scholarship. He went to a top university, and I bought him plane tickets during his breaks so he could return to spend time with his family. Years later, my wife and I ran into him at a Christmas party. We had not seen him or heard from him for almost 10 years. He had become a bitter and angry young man. He was very drunk, and his behavior was awful. He spent the evening insulting everyone within earshot, with particular barbs directed at the family who had invited him. I hoped he was having a bad night because of a personal crisis. I learned from his peers that he was like this all the time. He was completely unrecognizable from the young man I had placed in my faith in all those years ago. These are the experiences that can bring you down. Too many experiences like this one can result in your entering the classroom without the bounce in your step and the twinkle in your eye. Your students and you need both. So go the extra mile when you can, but go with care. Start me up. Here's a little thing I do each day in the parking lot at Hobart Elementary before I get out of my car. It may seem silly, but it works for me, and it doesn't hurt to share it. I usually pull into the lot between 6 and 6:05 a.m. It's dark, and there are 1 or 2 other cars there as well. It's quiet, especially after I turn off the Beatles or the Kinks blasting from my car stereo. For about a minute, I focus on things that have me worried or sad. You might call it a prayer or a moment of meditation. But whatever you call it, I take a few moments to pause and just think in the darkness. Perhaps I think of my daughter, who has been struggling with a difficult pregnancy. My wife has not been feeling well, and fortunately, tests at the hospital last week indicated that her problem was not a serious one. I know that later today, part of the lesson will be interrupted by a ridiculous assessment being given by the school district that will not help the kids. I think of everything possible that could get me down, and I remind myself to leave those problems in the car. They have no place in room 56. There are kids there with problems far greater than mine, and without the adult sensibilities to handle them. They need a positive, supportive, and happy human being in front of them all the time. There is no room for fatigue, sarcasm, or pessimism in any classroom. It's hard to write a song with bitter fingers, so do your best to recognize the enemy and leave it in the car. Joy must carry the day. For your consideration, do not pretend teaching is always a happy experience. Recognize the bitterness that can come back from a lack of appreciation and learn to deal with it rather than whine about it. Develop the ability to have amnesia and forget the bad moments. When a difficult parent or colleague does something insensitive or awful to you, feel bad about it for a few minutes and then move on. Stewing about the craziness of the job won't help you or your kids. It's not an exact science, but be careful about doing too much for your students. It might feel noble to try to save that one child no one else could reach, but often there is a reason no one succeeded before. Tilt at the few windmills, but if it becomes a habit, you might lose the desire to fix some kids with solvable problems. There is a tiny group of teachers whose achievements are recognized by the community and the school district. Unfortunately, most teachers, even the outstanding ones, are rarely given their due. Coming to that understanding can help you remain positive and effective. It is nice to be recognized. We all need a thumbs up from others. Realistically, the greatest satisfaction in teaching is good teaching itself, noticed or not. Remember Coach John Wooden's definition of success: peace of mind, knowing that you've done your best.